Hello guys, welcome back to yet another video. I hope you're all doing well. My name is Yoshi, and in today's video I'm going to give you some tips for snow photography and winter photography in general. One of the first tips I'm going to talk about is not camera gear related, but whenever you go out on a cold day, just make sure you wear the right clothing. Wear decent shoes, wear gloves, wear a warm jacket. Warm clothes are really important because whenever you go out to shoot, you will stand still for quite some time. And when standing still, your hands will get cold and your whole body will get cold. So wearing warm clothing is one key element for going out on a snowy day. If you're interested in more tips, just keep watching because I have plenty of more useful tips to go out on a snowy day. But first, it's time for some B-roll. Okay, now there's one last thing regarding the gloves I need to say. There are these special types of gloves that exist in which you can remove the fingers only. They are specifically designed for photographers with the idea that you can keep using your camera while wearing gloves. If you don't have this type of gloves, which I don't have, just make sure that you wear your gloves all the time, because whenever your fingers get cold, your body will get cold and you won't be able to take photos anymore. Your fingers will become stiff and you can't push the buttons or touch on your touch screens anymore. So keep that in mind, that you wear your gloves all the time whenever you don't need to handle your camera. And also keep in mind that you put your camera always back in your backpack if you don't want to take a photo at that time. That way you will spare the batteries and you will keep your gear protected from the weather elements. Oh, and this brings us to the next tip as well. Just make sure that you know what your camera can handle regarding the weather conditions. Most cameras can deal with a little bit of moisture, water, rain or snow, but not all cameras are completely weather sealed. So make sure that you protect your gear well enough. There are these type of plastic bags, rain bags also called, to protect your gear and your lenses. But if you don't own that kind of protective gear, then just make sure that you put your gear away every time you don't need to use it. Shooting on snowy days or in a snow landscape is way more difficult than it seems like. And I will tell you why. Whenever you watch a landscape, for instance, the landscape behind me, almost the entire landscape is completely covered in snow, which is all white. White is a really difficult color to expose for, so that will be something we need to keep in mind as well. But in addition, the landscape looks quite monotone. So we need to look for other ways to make our photos way more interesting. And those tips I'm going to give you in the next part of this video. The next piece of advice is really simple, but it's so crucial when going out on a very cold day in winter. Just always make sure that you protect your batteries and store them in a warm place. Storing them in a warm place is really important to keep your batteries fully charged, because the cold will affect the ions and the electrons in your batteries and result in a faster draining of your batteries. So it's really important to store them before your trip and during your trip in a warm place. One piece of advice for storing spare batteries is just by putting them in your inner pockets of your jacket, for instance, because your body warmth will keep them warm enough till you need them. Another really important technique is, for instance, when you use your GoPro and those small batteries, is not to mount your GoPro like I'm used to do on your chest mount all the time, but store it in your pockets whenever you're not record. That way you keep your device hot and running. Another really important tip before you go out and shoot on a really cold day is similar to the concept for people who are wearing glasses. Whenever you're wearing glasses, you probably already have suffered from the fact that your glasses start to condensate whenever you enter a warm building when you came from the outside, or vice versa. The same effect applies to your camera gear. So whenever you go go out after being inside for quite a while, your camera equipment will be quite warm. Especially your camera and your sensor, but also the lenses are really vulnerable for this effect and for condensation. So whenever you move outside, just keep your camera for a while inside your backpack so it can adjust to the cold temperatures. The same effect applies to whenever you're done with a shoot outside and you enter a warm house again. Never open your backpack before it's completely dry again, and never open your backpack until the temperature of the outside and inside of your backpack are similar to the inside room temperature, just to avoid it condensates on the glass and on the inside parts of your camera. It's also really dangerous for the electronics. Never try to do this, even though it might be tempting to watch those photos that you just took. Just don't fall for this trick. Now another really useful tip for doing winter photography is just looking for contrast in your shots. I already did a video in the past, basically 2 videos in the past, regarding creating contrast in your photos. But because of the white snow, it's really important to look for darker elements or things that create contrast, such as puddles or frozen puddles in case it's really cold, just to make your photos way more interesting. Contrast is key for your snow photography. Also, whenever you create some contrast in your snow photos, this might be the perfect way to create black and white photos. Speaking of contrast, I just found a place. What do you guys think about these trees? These trees are pretty dark against the white snow, so this is a beautiful example of creating contrasts in your photos. I'm using my smartphone right now just so my camera can get used to the cold temperatures before I talk more about other settings. I'm going to move right here as I have some more useful tips. This is really winter wonderland. Now another really useful tip is to think twice about your framing and your composition. I love to go low to the ground or shoot way up in the sky, just because those angles are not typical for most people, and that way your photos are way more interesting. So one piece of advice, think not like a tourist. So basically what you should do is move to a different angle that normal people who just walk by and people who are not into photography are not thinking about. For instance, here, this wooden walkway here, the 2 special angles are shooting it from higher above the ground level or eye level, but that's quite difficult right now unless I use the drone, but I don't have it with me and not all people have a drone. So another really interesting angle is going low to the ground or shooting upside down with the water serving as a contrast with the white tones. So I'm going to demonstrate those 2 things now and you will understand why I move always down. So this first shot is really simple. I'm just gonna take a photo. It's just upside down shot like that, facing to the water. And like I said before, creating contrast is really interesting. I'm going low to the ground as well, so I'm going as slow as I can. Like this. And maybe shooting up as well. Oh. Speaking of framing, if I hold my phone up like this, I will show you the photo. I'm using some branches of this tree as a foreground element. And I already took a shot like this. Now, Okay. So another example of playing around with your compositions is just looking up. And guys, look. Or just here to play with contrast by looking up. And get some really beautiful trees covered in snow. Now, if you think about special compositions, there's two ways to portray snow really simple. You can either take a photo from the landscape, so using a wide lens, and take a photo of the entire landscape covered in snow. But another way is to shoot details using a macro lens. That way you isolate certain subjects, and a subject being isolated really helps to play with bokeh in the background, and it helps you to draw attention to that one subject you wanted to portray. For instance, if you shoot a portrait, just make sure you shoot with a low f number, so f1.4 for instance. Also make sure that your background isn't too busy. So in a forest this is quite difficult, but in most cases I'm looking for a tree that stands a bit apart from the rest, or look for a large open area like we are approaching right now. And that way you can easily isolate some details. Okay, and we are lucky for spotting this large puddle here, because it really creates a nice reflection. Now there's a little bit of wind, so the reflection isn't too beautiful. This is really muddy. I'm still looking for a decent subject to isolate, but I want something interesting. But for instance, when I return back to creating contrast in your photos, this little creek here against the white of the snow is really and also think about leading lines. Leading lines are always a good way to make your photos way more interesting. They are not required, but they really help. Also, the framing of your photos is really important, because whenever you take photos in the snow, everything looks flat, and because of the white color, you easily lose your depth in the photos. So adding some foreground elements really helps to make the scene feel more alive. And it doesn't need to be something complex. Just a little branch or something is sometimes more than enough. So always make sure you look for natural ways to frame your subject, whether it's something like a leaf or a branch, a mushroom, or just a portrait shot. It doesn't matter. Now I'm walking through my favorite part of the woods, and I'm pretty sure I will find a nice leaf or branch or anything that's covered in snow to isolate from the background. And the disadvantage here is that it's way more difficult to isolate it in a dense forest. Oh my god. Looking up is sometimes worth more as well. I mean, look. Okay. We're almost I still need to explain you guys one thing, two things basically. But I see this puddle over here creating this beautiful reflection. Also, shooting reflections isn't always easy. There's two ways to do that. You either shoot it like this, upside down, or you include the actual object that's being mirrored. Okay. It's been raining the past few weeks, more than ever, and right now this is quite unique. It has been snowing this much right here in Belgium, at least at the northern parts of Belgium. For the southern parts it's quite common, we have snow every single year, but not here. Flanders barely gets any snow, or it's just one day. That's why I already released quite some videos, because I wanted to take advantage of that one single day that it was going to snow. But right now we're breaking all records. And benefit of this bad condition of this path is that not many people will choose to walk here. Just way too muddy. Okay guys, I finally found a subject that suits my needs to show you the principle of isolating a subject. This little branch over here covered in snow is really beautiful, and it stands out against the pot, which isn't too busy. I'm going to take some photos here and I will show you what the power is of isolating a subject when you're not having a busy background. Now I know there's still some trees standing behind us, but the pot here will break the busy background for sure. Now I'm going to use the macro lens of this smartphone and shoot in manual mode. Now the white balance is really difficult to get, so I'm going to set it to auto and see whatever it does. The most important thing is macro. Now you can also see I did correct here for the exposure, so the auto exposure by one stop. Now the reason why I do this is because something different plays in as well, but I will explain that to you in a bit. First of all, I'm going to focus on this part here. Might look for something different as well. Maybe this one here, this little branch. I still want to show you one last example of some beautiful reflections to create contrast in your photos, but my last tip is regarding the white balance. I already mentioned in the previous tip. Now, cameras are really complex computers and they are getting smarter and smarter, but they still get tricked whenever you are shooting in snow. Now the main reason why they are getting tricked is simple. Basically, whenever you take a photo in snow, almost everything in your shot is being white. White for your eyes, but not for your camera. Your camera will either be set to too cold, that has to do with the white balance that's being incorrect, or either too gray, and that's common for all cameras because it looks for the 50% gray color in your shot. As you're shooting an almost white photo, it's really difficult to point that 150% gray color tone. So that's why snow most of the time becomes gray in your photos. The main way to correct for this is either using your white balance correction in post, but if you want to make your photos already pretty good from the beginning, you need to overexpose your shot slightly. Now there's two ways to do that. You can either use a longer shutter speed and expose that way, or you can just do a minor correction in the exposure levels of your camera and set it to +1. You can go here to the exposure correction, and most of the time you need to set it to +1 or +1.5 or something like that. And I will show it to you in automatic mode. So for instance here, now the phones are already pretty good, but with a basic DSLR camera this effect will be way more notable. Now I will take a photo from this, and I will think about the framing, which is important as well, like this. So this shot, I will pop it up right now on screen, is taken without the automatic adjustments of the color of the white balance. And if I now hit, for instance, +1, you'll clearly see that the snow is white right now. And that way, guys, that way you can create really realistic shots without any post-processing at all. And that's it, guys. I'm just moving to the last spot. I did spot a beautiful large puddle among the trees, and I will take some photos over there, and I will let you enjoy how I take photos with my smartphone. Now just remember that all these tips I just mentioned apply to all types of camera, whether it's just your smartphone, DSLR camera, it doesn't matter. Oh, and maybe one last bonus tip: if you shoot during the day and the sun is playing with snow as well, just make sure you have some ND filters with you. ND filters are basically sunglasses that block the light from the sensor of your camera and avoid that you overexpose your shots. This is mainly required for using long exposure shots, so whenever you want to freeze little creeks or rivers or motion in general, or do some time lapses, or just film with the correct frame rates versus shutter speed. But more on that in a different video. Okay, this reflection is really epic. Make sure to add some foreground elements. Maybe one last tip, guys. Think about framing, and framing is really key for all your shots, so shoot through objects. And that way you create really interesting compositions. For instance, this one, oh man. So shooting through objects is key to make crazy photos. And sometimes you just need to think out of the box. Now that's it for this video, guys. I really hope you enjoyed these tips. I hope this will help you out for improving your winter photography. If you like this video, please consider hitting that like button. If you didn't already, please subscribe. Hit that notification bell to get a notification whenever I upload a new video, which is usually every single Wednesday. And just remember, you don't need to be great to start, but start to become great. Oh, and just one thing. Before you enter the house again, just leave your camera gear inside your camera backpack until everything is warm and dry. Without further ado, I hope to see you in the next one. Bye!